The execution chamber fell silent as Maya Chen's shackles clicked against the cold metal floor. The Galactic Council's highest magistrates sat in their towering seats, their alien forms casting long shadows across the sterile white room. Ambassador Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire leaned forward, his crystalline features gleaming under the harsh lights. Human designated Maya Chun, serial number 7749 Alpha, you stand condemned for crimes against galactic peace. His voice echoed through the translation matrix. Your species' tendency toward violence and chaos has been documented. Your personal actions in the Kepler 442 incident resulted in 17 alien casualties. Maya lifted her head, her brown eyes blazing with defiance despite the bruises covering her face. They were shooting at the refugee ships. Children were on those vessels. Irrelevant, hissed Counselor Thrakel, her serpentine form coiling tighter around her perch. You destroyed a lawfully operating enforcement squadron. The penalty for such aggression is death. The chamber erupted in clicks, whistles, and electronic harmonics as dozens of alien species voiced their agreement. Maya had seen this before. Humans were the youngest species in the galactic community, barely 300 years since first contact. They were seen as barbaric, unpredictable, dangerous. Every human action was scrutinized, every mistake magnified. However, Ambassador Vextar continued, raising one crystalline hand for silence. The Council recognizes that immediate execution would be wasteful. You will serve a greater purpose. Maya's stomach dropped. She had heard whispers about the Council's special punishments, rumors that made even hardened criminals pale. You will be transported to the Forbidden Sector, specifically to the world designated Drachma Prime. There, you will be delivered to the entity known as the Crimson Death, the last of the Elder Dragons. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the atmospheric recyclers seemed to pause their humming. For 3,000 years, the Crimson Death has slumbered in the ruins of the ancient precursor civilization. Every 100 years, we send it tribute to ensure it remains dormant. Your life will serve this purpose. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. The Elder Dragons were legend, creatures from the galaxy's earliest days when magic and technology intertwined. Most species believe they were extinct. The beast has consumed tributes from every member species of the Council, Counselor Thrakel added with obvious satisfaction. Zephyrian warriors, Thalnese scholars, Mordak hunters. None have lasted more than moments against its fury. You will provide it entertainment for perhaps a few minutes before your inevitable death. And if I refuse? Maya asked, though she already knew the answer. Then, you die here, now by plasma disintegration, Vextar replied. At least on Drachma Prime, you have the illusion of chance. Maya closed her eyes. She thought of her younger brother back on Earth, of her parents who had already lost one child to the Galactic War. She thought of the refugee children she had saved, now safely in human space. Perhaps her death could buy them more time. I accept. The transport ship was a sleek Mordak vessel, its dark hull designed for stealth rather than comfort. Maya sat in the cramped holding cell, her wrists still bound by energy shackles. The Mordak captain, a 7-foot-tall reptilian creature named Gorthak, occasionally checked on her through the cell's force field. Human, he growled through his translator during one visit. I have transported many tributes to the beast. None have ever returned. Some begged, some wept, some raged. You do none of these things. Maya looked up from where she sat meditating on the narrow bench. Would any of those change what's going to happen? Gorthak's yellow eyes studied her. No. Then, why waste energy on it? The captain made a sound that might have been laughter. Perhaps the beast will find you amusing for longer than most. As they dropped out of hyperspace near Drachma Prime, Maya pressed her face against the small porthole. The planet below was a swirling mass of red and orange clouds, split by jagged continents of black stone. Ancient structures jutted from the landscape like broken teeth, the remnants of a civilization that had vanished long before any current species had achieved spaceflight. The precursors built cities that could house billions, Gorthak explained, following her gaze. They created technologies that we still cannot comprehend. Yet something destroyed them all. Most believe it was the Elder Dragons, turning against their creators. The ship shuddered as they entered the atmosphere. The readings on Maya's cell monitor showed toxic air, crushing gravity, and radiation levels that would kill most species within hours. Her human physiology would give her perhaps a day of survival, assuming the dragon didn't find her immediately. They landed in the shadow of a massive pyramidal structure, its surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when looked at directly. Gordhack led Maya down the ship's ramp, her shackles now replaced with a simple tracking device. The ritual must be performed correctly, he explained, consulting a datapad covered in ancient script. You will walk to the temple entrance. You will call out the traditional words. Then you will enter and await the beast. Maya nodded. The air was thick and acrid, burning her throat with each breath. The gravity made her feel like she was wearing a suit of lead. But she was alive, and while she lived, there's always a chance. Gordhack handed her a small recording device. Speak your final words for your species. It is traditional. Maya took the device, her hands steady despite everything. She thought for a moment, then spoke clearly into the recorder. My name is Maya Chun, daughter of Earth, protector of the innocent. If anyone receives this message, know that I do not regret my choices. The universe is vast and full of wonders, but it is also full of those who would harm the defenseless. Stand against them. Fight for what is right, even when the odds seem impossible. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our weapons. It has been our refusal to give up hope. She handed the device back to Gordhack, who secured it in his ship's data core. The temple entrance is 200 meters ahead, he said, his voice unusually gentle. When you call out, use these words, Mighty Crimson Death, Lord of the Ancient Sky, I come bearing the gift of my life. Accept this tribute and remain at peace. Maya memorized the phrase and began walking toward the temple. Behind her, she heard Gordhack's ship powering up for immediate departure. No one stayed on Drachma Prime longer than necessary. The temple entrance was a massive archway carved with intricate reliefs of dragons soaring among stars. As Maya approached, she could feel heat radiating from within, along with something else. A presence, ancient, vast, and awakening. She stopped at the threshold and called out the ritual words, her voice echoing in the thin air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from deep within the temple, came a sound that made her bones vibrate. Not quite a roar, not quite speech, but something that conveyed amusement and anticipation. Maya took a deep breath of the toxic air and stepped into the darkness. The entrance sealed behind her with a grinding of stone on stone. Somewhere in the depths ahead, something massive was stirring, and the temperature was rising rapidly. Her execution had begun. The temple corridors stretched endlessly into darkness, lit only by a faint red glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Maya's footsteps echoed hollowly as she made her way deeper into the structure. The air grew hotter with each step, and she could taste metal and sulfur on her tongue. Ancient murals covered the walls, depicting scenes that made her pause despite her situation. These weren't the crude cave paintings she might have expected, but sophisticated artwork showing dragons and humanoid figures working together, building cities, exploring stars, creating wonders that defied comprehension. The precursors and the dragons were allies, she whispered to herself, studying one particularly detailed scene showing a massive dragon gentle enough to allow small figures to ride on its back. What happened to break that bond? A deep rumbling answered her question, vibrating through the stone beneath her feet. The sound was getting closer. Maya pressed forward, her hand trailing along the wall for guidance. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and she gasped at what she saw. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above, supported by columns carved to look like twisted trees. But it was the floor that caught her attention. Scattered across the chamber were bones. Not random piles, but carefully arranged remains of dozens of different alien species. Zephyrian crystal fragments, Falnese chitin plates, Mordak scales, and dozens of others she didn't recognize. Each set of remains was positioned respectfully, almost ceremonially. 3,000 years of tributes, Maya murmured, walking carefully among them. Something about the arrangement bothered her. These weren't the scattered bones of creatures torn apart by a savage beast. They were laid out with care, almost with reverence. A new sound filled the chamber. Breathing. Deep, rhythmic, and close. Maya turned toward the far end of the chamber and froze. Two enormous golden eyes opened in the darkness, each one larger than her entire body. They regarded her with an intelligence that was unmistakably ancient and utterly alien. Another tribute. A voice spoke directly into her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. The mental voice was cultured, speaking perfect standard galactic with just a hint of amusement. How curious. You do not cower. Would cowering change anything? Maya asked aloud, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A sound that might have been laughter echoed through the chamber. How delightfully practical. Most tributes spend their final moments pleading or praying. The Zephyrian warriors challenge me to combat. The Falnese try to bargain with knowledge. The Mordak attempt to flee. But you ask logical questions. The massive form shifted in the darkness, and Maya caught glimpses of crimson scales that gleamed like polished metal, of claws longer than ancient swords, of wings folded against a body larger than most spacecraft. I am Virith Moore, last of the Crimson Brood, keeper of the final truth. The Council calls me the Crimson Death, though that name was earned in battles they have forgotten. The dragon's mental voice carried weight, history, and something that sounded almost like sadness. Why do you accept their tributes? Maya asked, taking a step closer. You're obviously intelligent. You could leave this place, couldn't you? Leave. The golden eyes blinked slowly. Child, I am bound here by chains stronger than any metal. Bound by oath and honor and the weight of the greatest mistake ever made. Maya looked around the chamber again, studying the carefully arranged bones. These tributes. You didn't kill them in rage, did you? Perceptive. Virith Moore's massive head emerged from the shadows, and Maya saw features that were both terrifying and magnificent. The dragon's face was intelligent, noble even, despite the predatory fangs and the heat that radiated from its nostrils. Each died peacefully after sharing their stories with me. I gave them the gift of a good death, free from fear. Their stories. In 3 millennia of solitude, young tribute, stories become precious beyond measure. Each visitor brings news of the galaxy beyond these walls. I learn of new species, new conflicts, new wonders. In return, I grant them a swift, painless end. Maya felt something shift in her understanding. You're lonely. The great head tilted. Loneliness is a concept for social creatures. I'm the last of my kind. The word you seek is incomplete. Why are you bound here? What oath holds a dragon? For a long moment, the chamber fell silent except for the dragon's breathing. When Virith Moore spoke again, his mental voice carried the weight of millennia. We were partners once, dragons and precursors. They gave us intelligence beyond instinct, and we gave them power beyond technology. Together, we built wonders that span galaxies. But the precursors grew curious about forces beyond the physical realm. The dragon's eyes closed, and Maya could feel the pain in his thoughts. They opened doorways to dimensions that should have remained sealed. Things came through, ancient entities of pure malevolence that consumed everything in their path. The Void Devourers, we called them. Reality itself bent and twisted in their presence. Maya found herself leaning forward, captivated despite her situation. The war lasted centuries. Entire star systems were consumed. The precursors created weapons that cracked planets, but still the Devourers advanced. In the end, only one solution remained. What solution? Sacrifice. The dragons linked our life force to the barriers holding the Devourers back. As long as we lived, the seals would hold. But one by one, my king gave their lives to strengthen the barriers. I am the last guardian, bound to this place where the final seal was forged. Maya stared at the magnificent creature before her. You're not a monster at all. You're a guardian. The council doesn't know, do they? The current species are children, barely aware of the true history of this galaxy. They see only old legends and convenient scapegoats. They send me tributes to keep the monster appeased, never realizing that their very existence depends on my continued vigilance. Then, why don't you tell them the truth? Virith Moore's laugh was bitter. Would you believe such a tale from a creature they call the Crimson Death? And even if they did, what then? They would demand I leave this place, abandoning my post. The seals would weaken without my presence. The devourers would sense the weakness and push against their bonds. Maya walked closer, now standing just meters from the dragon's massive head. How long do you have to maintain a vigil? Until another dragon is born. Until the next guardian can take my place. But we are an ancient species, slow to reproduce. It could be millennia more before such a miracle occurs. Or until the galaxy finds another way to maintain the seals. Impossible. The magic required is beyond any current species comprehension. Maya studied the dragon's face, seeing the exhaustion behind those golden eyes. 3,000 years of solitude, of accepting tributes and listening to their stories before granting them peaceful deaths. 3,000 years of guarding the galaxy from horrors it didn't even know existed. What's my story worth to you? She asked suddenly. Virith Moore's eyes opened wider. Your story. Every tribute tells you their story before they die. What would you trade for mine? The dragon's massive head lowered until it was level with hers. What do you mean, young human? I mean, what if there was another way? What if the galaxy's newest, youngest species might have insights that the older ones missed? What if a human perspective could find solutions that millennia of dragon wisdom haven't discovered? You would bargain for your life with theoretical possibilities? Maya smiled, and for the first time since entering the temple, she felt genuinely hopeful. I would bargain for both our lives with human stubbornness and refusal to accept impossible situations. Virith Moore stared at her for a long moment, then threw back his massive head and laughed. The sound filled the chamber like rolling thunder. 3,000 years of tributes, and finally, one arrives who wishes to negotiate. Very well, Maya Chun of Earth, tell me your story, and convince me that your continued existence might benefit more than just yourself. Maya settled cross-legged on the chamber floor, directly in front of the last dragon in the galaxy. Let me tell you about humanity, she began, and why we never learned to give up. Maya began her story as the ancient dragon listened, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to peer into her very soul. The chamber around them felt less threatening now, more like a library where knowledge was shared between scholars. Humans are stubborn by nature, Maya said, settling more comfortably on the stone floor. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us in every way possible. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators with claws, and fangs like yours. But bigger. Virith Moore's mental chuckle resonated through her mind. Bigger than me? Impossible. Well, maybe not bigger than you specifically, but big enough. The point is, we learned early that survival meant adapting, learning, and never giving up. When we reached for the stars, we brought that attitude with us. She told him about human history, about civilizations that rose and fell, each one learning from the mistakes of the last, about scientists who spent lifetimes pursuing single theories, about explorers who died seeking new lands, about ordinary people who accomplished extraordinary things simply by refusing to accept defeat. The Galactic Council sees us as violent and chaotic, Maya continued. They're not entirely wrong, but they miss the context. Humans fight hardest when we're protecting something precious. The refugee ships I saved at Kepler, 442, they were carrying families fleeing the Vorthan slave trade, children who would have been sold to the highest bidder. The Council deemed the Vorthan operation legal under subsection 7 of the Galactic Commerce Accords, Virith Moore noted. Legal doesn't mean right. That's something humans have never been good at accepting. We've fought wars against slavery, against oppression, against systems that treat people as property. We've made terrible mistakes along the way, but we've always eventually chosen to fight for the innocent. The dragon's massive head tilted thoughtfully. Your species challenges established order. Constantly. It drives the older species crazy. But that's exactly why we might be able to help you. Maya stood and began pacing, her mind racing as pieces of an impossible puzzle began to fall into place. You've been guarding these seals for 3,000 years, using dragon magic to maintain barriers that hold back entities from another dimension. That's impressive, but it's also a single-point failure. What happens if you die? What happens if the magic fails? The seals weaken and eventually break. The devourers return. Right. So the precursors created a system that depended entirely on dragons, sacrificing themselves indefinitely. That's not a solution. It's just delaying the inevitable. Virith Moore's eyes narrowed. And you believe your young species could find a better way? I believe my young species wouldn't accept that this was the only way. Maya gestured at the murals on the walls. These pictures show dragons and precursors working together, combining magic and technology. But you're telling me the solution to the devourer problem was purely magical. What if that's the mistake? Explain. Maya walked to one of the murals depicting a dragon and a precursor scientist working together over some complex device. Human technology is different from what the precursors developed. We don't just build bigger weapons or more powerful computers. We build redundant systems, fail-safe mechanisms, distributed networks. We prepare for things to go wrong because we learn that everything eventually breaks. She turned back to face the dragon. What if instead of one dragon maintaining multiple seals, you could teach others to help? What if technology could augment or replace the magical components? What if we could create a system that didn't require any single being to sacrifice millennia of their life? Virith Moore was quiet for several minutes, his breathing the only sound in the vast chamber. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was carefully controlled. Such theories are theoretically sound, but the practical challenges would be enormous. The knowledge required, the cooperation needed between species, the risks of experimentation near the seals themselves. Enormous challenges are what humans specialize in, Maya said with a grin. We once landed on our moon using computers less powerful than a modern calculator, simply because we decided it needed to be done. You would risk the safety of the entire galaxy on untested theories. I would risk experimenting with new solutions rather than accept that the current system is sustainable. You're exhausted, Virith Moore. I can see it in your eyes. 3 millennia of solitude is taking its toll. What happens when you finally break? What happens when loneliness and despair override your sense of duty? The dragon flinched as if struck. I would never abandon my post. Not intentionally, but even dragons have limits. What if I told you that there might be a way to share the burden? What if instead of one last dragon standing guard, you could train helpers, create backups, build a system that could survive anything? Virith Moore's massive head lowered until it nearly touched the floor. You speak of hope, human child. Hope is a dangerous thing for those bound by duty. Hope is what kept humans alive when we should have gone extinct a dozen times over. It's what drove us to the stars when everyone said it was impossible. It's what made me defend those refugee ships, even when I knew it would cost me my life. Maya approached the dragon until she was close enough to touch his scales. The heat radiating from his body was intense, but not unbearable. Let me make a bargain with you, Virith Moore. Don't give me a peaceful death. Give me a chance to bring you help. Let me return to human space with your story. Let me convince my people and the other species that there's a threat they need to know about and a hero they need to assist. The Council would never believe you. They sent you here to die. The Council isn't the galaxy. They're politicians, and politicians are always the last to accept new realities. But there are scientists, explorers, rebels, and visionaries among every species. Give me access to the real history, to the technical details of the seals, to proof of what you're guarding against. Let me take that information back to people who can actually do something with it. Virith Moore raised his head, studying her with those ancient golden eyes. And if you fail, if no one believes you, if your efforts come to nothing, then I come back here and accept the peaceful death you offer. But I'll have tried. That's what humans do. We try impossible things until they become possible. The dragon was silent for so long that Maya began to wonder if she had overplayed her hand. But finally he spoke, his mental voice filled with something that sounded almost like wonder. In 3,000 years, no tribute has ever offered to return. They all sought to escape, to flee, to bargain for their lives. But you offer to come back and face death after attempting to save me. I offer to attempt the impossible because it needs attempting. Whether I live or die is secondary to whether the galaxy survives. Virith Moore slowly raised his massive head, and Maya could see something new in his expression. For the first time in millennia, the last dragon looked hopeful. Very well, Maya, Chun of Earth. I will make this bargain with you. I will share the true history, the technical knowledge, the proof you seek. You will return to your people and attempt this impossible task. But know this, if the seals begin to weaken because of your actions, if your experiments threaten the barriers that hold back the devourers, I will end the threat myself. Meaning I will destroy any facility, any ship, any world that threatens the integrity of the seals. Even if that world is Earth. Maya nodded solemnly. Understand. And I accept those terms. The dragon's laugh was like distant thunder. Then, let us begin your education, young human. You have much to learn about the true dangers that lurk in the spaces between dimensions. As Virith Moore began to rise, his massive form uncoiling in the darkness, Maya felt a thrill of terror and excitement. She was about to learn secrets that had been hidden for 3 millennia. She was about to undertake a task that could save or damn the galaxy. It was exactly the kind of impossible challenge that made her glad to be human. For 7 days, Maya lived in the temple with Virith Moore, learning secrets that had been lost to the galaxy for 3 millennia. The dragon shared his memories through direct mental connection, flooding her mind with images and knowledge that left her reeling. She saw the precursor civilization at its height, vast cities that spanned entire continents, populated by tall, graceful beings whose technology bordered on magic. She witnessed the partnership between dragons and precursors, watching as they explored dimensions beyond normal space-time, seeking knowledge and power. They were brilliant, Virith Moore explained as he showed her images of precursor scientists working alongside dragons to create dimensional gates. Perhaps too brilliant for their own good. They could not resist opening doors that should have remained closed. Maya watched in horror as the first void devourers emerged from an experimental portal, reality bending and twisting around them. They were not creatures in any sense she understood, but rather absences that consumed everything they touched. Light, matter, energy, even the structure of space itself was devoured, leaving behind voids that spread like cancer through reality. How do you fight something like that? Maya asked, her mental voice shaking as she watched entire star systems consumed. You don't fight them, Virith Moore replied grimly. You can only contain them. The precursors learned this too late. Their weapons, no matter how powerful, only fed the devourers. Energy attacks were absorbed, matter-based weapons were consumed, even antimatter was devoured and converted to fuel their growth. The dragon showed her the desperate final years of the war, as dragons and precursors worked together to forge dimensional barriers powered by life force itself. One by one, the dragons sacrificed themselves to create seals that would hold back the consuming void. The barriers are not perfect, Virith Moore explained. They require constant maintenance, constant vigilance. The slightest weakness allows the devourers to probe for escape routes. Over the millennia, I have sensed them testing the barriers, seeking any flaw they can exploit. Maya studied the technical specifications that flowed through her mind, dragon magic translated into concepts her human brain could grasp. These seals are incredible, but you're right about the single-point failure. What happens when you finally die of old age? Dragons do not die of age as other creatures do. We grow larger, stronger, more powerful as the centuries pass. But we do tire. We do fade. I estimate I have perhaps another 1,000 years before the burden becomes too much to bear. 1,000 years to find a solution, or 1,000 years to train a replacement, should another dragon be born. Maya spent hours studying the seal mechanisms, trying to understand how dragon magic interfaced with dimensional barriers. The complexity was staggering, but patterns began to emerge. The magic wasn't just raw power. It was incredibly sophisticated programming, constantly adjusting and adapting to counter the Devourer's probing attacks. It's like the galaxy's most complex computer system, she mused, running on biological processors. An interesting analogy, Virithmore replied, though I suspect your computers lack the intuitive elements that magic provides. Maybe, but they have other advantages. Redundancy, for one. Human systems are designed to work even when individual components fail. On the 7th day, Virithmore made his decision. You have learned enough to begin your mission. But first, you must prove to your species that what you tell them is true. The dragon led her deeper into the temple complex, through chambers she hadn't seen before. Ancient precursor technology lined the walls, devices that hummed with power despite their age. At the center of it all was a massive chamber containing the primary seal. Maya gasped as she entered. The seal was beautiful and terrible, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Within its depths, she could see movement, shapes that hurt to look at directly, pressing against the barrier from the other side. They never stopped trying to break through, Virithmore said quietly. Every moment of every day for 3,000 years, I've felt them testing our defenses. How do you stand it? By remembering what happens if I fail. The dragon moved to a control panel that was part magic, part technology. Ancient symbols flowed across crystalline displays as he made adjustments to the seal's configuration. I'm going to give you a small demonstration, he said. Something that will provide proof of what you have learned, but also serve as a warning about what we face. He manipulated the controls, and a tiny section of a seal flickered. For just an instant, a gap appeared no larger than Maya's fist. That instant was enough. Something pushed through the gap before Virithmore could seal it again. Not a physical creature, but a tendril of absolute nothingness that immediately began consuming the air around it. The very atoms of the atmosphere simply ceased to exist where the tendril touched. Maya scrambled backward as the dragon roared, pouring magical energy into the breach to force it closed. The tendril writhed for several seconds before being severed from its source, the disconnected portion dissolving into harmless energy. That, Virithmore panted, the effort of resealing the breach having visibly drained him, is what a single Devourer probe can do. Imagine billions of them, each the size of a starship, working in coordination to unmake reality itself. Maya stared at the spot where the tendril had been, her hand shaking. The Council has no idea what they're dealing with, which is why your mission is so crucial. They must be made to understand. Virithmore led her to another chamber where a small spacecraft waited, clearly of precursor design, but modified with more recent technology. This vessel can reach your space undetected. Its databases contain everything you have learned here, along with full technical specifications of the SEAL network. You're trusting me with everything. I am trusting humanity with everything, the dragon corrected. Your species' refusal to accept defeat may be our only hope of finding a new solution. Maya climbed in the pilot's seat, familiarizing herself with controls that were intuitive despite being alien. What will you tell the Council when they discover I'm not dead? Nothing. Let them wonder. Fear of the unknown may serve our purposes better than comfortable ignorance. As Maya prepared for departure, Virithmore placed one massive claw gently on the ship's hull. Maya, Chin of Earth, before you go, I must ask you something. In all your studies of human nature, in all the stories of your species' stubborn refusal to give up, have you ever encountered a problem that humanity could not eventually solve? Maya thought for a moment, then smiled. No, but then, again, we've never tried to solve anything quite this big before. Then, perhaps it is time to find out what happens when an unstoppable human meets an immovable problem. The ship lifted off from Drachma Prime, leaving behind the ancient temple and its guardian. As Maya engaged the hyperdrive, she looked back one final time at the world where the last dragon kept his lonely vigil. "Don't worry, Virith Moore," she whispered. "Humans are very good at making friends. You won't be alone much longer." The ship vanished into hyperspace, carrying with it knowledge that would either save the galaxy or doom it. Behind her, the Crimson Death settled back into his millennia-long watch, but for the first time in 3,000 years, he was smiling. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity decided that the impossible simply meant they needed to try harder. 6 months after leaving Drachma Prime, Maya stood before the emergency assembly of the Terran Federation, her presentation holographic displays floating behind her, showing technical schematics that had never been seen by human eyes. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every human colony, along with sympathetic delegates from several alien species. "The Galactic Council believes they sent me to die," Maya concluded her presentation. "Instead, they gave me the chance to learn the most important secret in the galaxy. We are all living under the protection of a single being who has sacrificed everything to keep us safe from a threat we don't even know exists." Admiral Chun Wei, Maya's uncle and head of the Terran Defense Force, leaned forward. "You're asking us to believe that reality itself is under attack by creatures from another dimension, held back only by the last dragon in the galaxy." "I'm asking you to look at the evidence," Maya replied, activating another hologram. "These energy readings are from the dimensional barriers. This is the mathematical framework for how dragon magic interfaces with quantum foam. This is video footage of an actual Void Devourer probe attempting to break through." The assembly watched in stunned silence as the recording from Drachma Prime played, showing the tendril of nothingness consuming matter at the atomic level. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's leading theoretical physicist, stood up. "Even if we accept this is real, what can we do? We're talking about magical forces that human technology can't even detect, let alone replicate." "That's where you're wrong," Maya said, smiling. "We can't replicate dragon magic, but we don't need to. We need to augment it, support it, create redundancies around it." She activated a new series of displays showing theoretical designs that had kept her awake for weeks during the journey home. Virith Moore has been maintaining these seals alone for 3 millennia using pure magical energy. But magic follows rules just like physics. It can be measured, predicted, and supplemented with technology. The design showed a network of quantum processing stations positioned around the galaxy, each one designed to monitor dimensional barrier integrity and provide automated support when needed. "We can't replace the dragon," Maya explained, "but we can give him help. Quantum computers running predictive algorithms to anticipate Devourer probe patterns. Automated systems to reinforce weak points in the barriers. Most importantly, trained human technicians who can learn to interface with dragon magic and provide backup if something happens to Virith Moore." Senator Maria Santos raised her hand. "This would require cooperation from multiple species. The Galactic Council just tried to execute you. Why would they listen now?" Maya's expression hardened. "Because we're not going to ask permission. We're going to prove the concept works, then present them with a solution they can't ignore." Over the following months, humanity mobilized like never before. The best scientists, engineers, and computer specialists from across human space converged on a classified research station near the galactic edge. They were joined by volunteers from other species who had grown disillusioned with the Council's heavy-handed rule. Dr. Thanakel, a brilliant Thaunese quantum engineer, defected from her previous position to join the project. "The Council has grown complacent," she explained to Maya during one of their late-night planning sessions. They maintain power through fear and tradition, not innovation. If what you say is true, they've been inadvertently threatening galactic security for centuries with their ignorance. The project faced enormous challenges. Dragon magic operated on principles that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Creating technology that could interface with it required entirely new theoretical frameworks. But humans had never been deterred by impossible physics before. Dr. Kim led a team that developed quantum resonance chambers, devices that could detect and interact with magical energy fields. Engineer Marcus Webb created self-repairing construction drones capable of operating in the hostile environment near dimensional barriers. Pilot Lisa Zhang trained a squadron of volunteers to operate vessels designed for transdimensional work. The breakthrough came when they successfully created a small-scale version of a dimensional barrier, maintained jointly by quantum processors and a human technician who had learned to channel basic magical principles. The barrier held stable for 3 days before being deliberately deactivated. "It works," Dr. Kim breathed, staring at the data readouts. "We actually created a stable dimensional barrier using hybrid technology." Maya activated her secure communication link to Drachma Prime. The dragon's response came immediately. "I felt it." Virith Moore's mental voice carried across space with surprising clarity. "A new barrier, different from mine, but compatible with it. How is this possible?" "It turns out that magic and quantum mechanics aren't as incompatible as everyone thought," Maya explained. "We think magic is actually a form of quantum field manipulation that biological neural networks can access directly. Our computers can simulate the same effects." "You have created artificial magic." "We've created technological support for natural magic. The barriers we can make aren't as strong or sophisticated as yours, but they can supplement your work. More importantly, they can be mass-produced." The silence from Drachma Prime stretched for several minutes before Virith Moore responded, his mental voice filled with something that sounded like awe. "In 3,000 years of solitude, I never dared hope for such a possibility." The full-scale test came 2 years after Maya's return to human space. A massive construction fleet, composed of ships from a dozen species, assembled near the edge of the galaxy where the dimensional barriers were thinnest. Working in coordination with Virith Moore, they installed the first quantum support station directly into the barrier network. The moment the station came online, its effects were immediate. Virith Moore's burden lessened for the first time in millennia as automated systems began handling routine maintenance of the barriers. Quantum processors predicted devourer probe patterns hours in advance, allowing preemptive reinforcement of vulnerable areas. "It is working beyond my greatest expectations," Virith Moore reported, his mental voice stronger than Maya had ever heard it. "The barriers are more stable now than they have been in centuries." But their success could not remain hidden forever. The Galactic Council fleet that arrived at the test site was massive, led by Ambassador Vextar himself. Their message was simple and direct: cease all unauthorized dimensional experiments or face complete annihilation. Maya met the Council fleet in her own ship, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Ambassador Vextar, members of the Galactic Council, you are interfering with operations critical to the survival of all life in this galaxy. I am transmitting historical data and current threat assessments that you need to review before taking any action. Human, you were condemned to death by this council." Vextar's crystalline voice crackled with anger. "Your continued existence is an affront to galactic law. These illegal experiments end now." "Then, you'll have to go through me to stop them," Maya replied calmly. "And then, you'll have to explain to your constituencies why you doomed them all to interdimensional predation out of political pride." The standoff lasted for hours as council ships surrounded the human fleet. But Maya had learned something important about galactic politics during her time away. The council maintained power through carefully managed ignorance, but they were not entirely stupid. When the preliminary data analysis came back confirming the existence of the dimensional barriers and the threat they contained, the council's position began to weaken. When several member species-owned scientists confirmed the mathematical validity of the human solution, opposition crumbled entirely. The formal agreement was signed aboard Virith Mor's temple, with the dragon himself serving as witness. The Galactic Council officially recognized the Dimensional Barrier Project as essential to galactic security, with humanity taking the lead in developing hybrid technology solutions. Maya stood beside the massive dragon as representatives from dozens of species signed the accords that would reshape galactic civilization. 3,000 years of loneliness, Virith Mor mused, ended by the stubbornness of one human who refused to accept death. Humanity has always been good at making friends, Maya replied. We just needed to find someone worth befriending. The dragon's laughter echoed through the temple chamber as construction crews worked around them, installing quantum support systems that would ensure the galaxy's safety for millennia to come. 5 years later, the Dimensional Barrier Network spanned the galaxy, maintained by a partnership between dragon magic and human technology. Virith Mor was no longer alone. Hundreds of human technicians had learned to interface with dragon magic, and several other dormant dragons had been awakened from hibernation to help with the expanded system. Maya, now director of dimensional security for the Galactic Federation, stood on the observation deck of the primary monitoring station, watching status displays that showed barrier integrity across the galaxy. Every barrier was stable, every devourer probe detected, and neutralized before it could gain a foothold in reality. Status report, she called to her shift supervisor. All barriers operating at optimal efficiency, Director. The quarterly maintenance cycle completed ahead of schedule, and we're receiving reports of another dragon awakening in the Andromeda sector. Maya smiled. Humanity had done what they did best, taken an impossible situation and refused to accept it as impossible. The galaxy was safe, the barriers were stronger than ever, and the last dragon was no longer the last. It was, she reflected, exactly the kind of outcome that made her proud to be human. They had turned execution into alliance, despair into hope, and the end of all things into a new beginning. The Void Devourers still pressed against their barriers, but they would find no weakness there. The galaxy had learned to work together, guided by human stubbornness and dragon wisdom. And somewhere in the depths of space, reality itself had never been more secure.